So an American actor, Matthew McConaughey, he won an Oscar back in 2014 for the Best Actor category. And obviously he gave a speech, and it was a classic Oscar speech in that he just thanked everyone under the sun. But then as he went on, he made probably one of the best moments in a speech in recent decades. He said there are three things he needs each day. He says, I need someone to look up to, someone to look forward to, and someone to chase. So the someone he looks up to is God. And it's kind of what you expect. He's a Texan. But then he says that the someone he looks forward to is his family. It's his mother, it's his wife Camilla, it's his boys Levi and Peter. They're the people in life, he says, as he goes out the door that he most wants to make proud. And he also says there is someone to chase. And the person he wants to chase is his hero. And who's his hero? It's him in 10 years' time. So when he was 15, he chased the person he wanted to be when he was 25. And when he was 25, he said, I want to chase the person I want to be when I'm 35. He knows he's never going to get there, but he's always chasing the person he wants to be. And he finished his speech this way. So for all of us, whatever those things are, whatever you look up to, whatever you look forward to, whoever it is you are chasing, to that I say amen. To that I say all right, all right, all right. And to that I say, just keep on living. There's some of his catchphrases, if you knew his films. It's a great clip, if you check it out on YouTube. But McConaughey, he sets up the reality we all face. There are people who loom big on our horizons. There are people who influence us in profound ways. Some people, we allow them to influence us and our decisions and our choices. Others, we decide to reject their influence on us. Maybe it's decisions about career. Maybe it's decisions about important life choices we make. Maybe it's as we decide what our values are going to be. And none of those are done in isolation of other people. We all follow people. You know, those are our real leaders. Leaders are, by definition, people that you follow. I wonder, have you ever stopped and thought, who is it you follow? You know, who are those who are shaping your decisions, shaping your life, shaping your life choices? Maybe it's a school teacher who was profoundly influential. Maybe it was a parent or a uni peer, or a YouTube star, if that is you. Stop watching YouTube. An author, a poet, a musician. Who shapes you? In the words of Matthew McConaughey, who is it you look up to? Who is it you look forward to? Who is it that you chase? The book of 1 Samuel is all about finding a leader. We're starting a new series today. In the book of 1 Samuel. And it asks the question, well, what sort of leader should you be? But more importantly, what sort of leader should you want to follow? You know, who is it you want to avoid? Who is it that you want to find shelter under? And actually, who is the one perfect leader we all need? See, the book starts in a massive leadership vacuum. So keep your finger in 1 Samuel 1 and just flick back about 3 pages to the end of the book of Judges. Judges chapter 21. And have a look at verse 25. Okay, this is 3,000 years ago. We're about 1050 BC. God's people have been rescued from Egypt. They're finally in the land. They've had 200 years in the land, which has been an extraordinary time of social upheaval, virginal times of anarchy. And during those 200 years, God has raised up leader after leader who has rescued the people. They've had clay feet. They've led the people. They've died. Things have ended in chaos, and the cycle's repeated again and again and again as God's people have lurched and lurched and lurched between one disaster to the next. And look at 21 verse 25. Look at what he says. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. Can you imagine living in a society where everyone decided what was right and wrong for themselves? Do you know what? I don't like the fact that you've just disrespected me, and so I'm going to stab you with a knife. I'm going to go into your shop, and I don't like your attitude, so I'm not going to pay for this. I'm just going to take it. I don't like quite how much they pay me, so I'm going to fiddle my expenses. As long as I am true to myself, then I'm going to do whatever I want. Would you like to live in a world like that? Do you think we live in a world like that? Well, 1 Samuel is God's answer to that problem. As God brings before us 3 leaders in this crisis. And on the way up to Christmas, we're going to meet Samuel in chapters 1 to 7. He is the one who paves the way for the king. Maybe after Christmas, I haven't decided this yet, but you hit 8 to 15, where you meet Saul. He's the king that everyone longs for, but he is a disaster. Absolute disaster. And then finally you meet the king after God's own heart. He is the one that we actually need, David. See, time and again, God brings leadership into this postage stamp of a nation, not just to bring stability and salvation for God's people, but through him and through this nation to bring stability and salvation to the world. See, God is going to bring someone who will be the hope of the world. And so the story started today in a pretty unexceptional way, didn't it? Have a look at 1 verse 1. Listen to this. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, or as Bev said, Elkanah. It's like Bath or Bath, isn't it? I would say Elkanah. You said Elkanah. No, I'd say Elkanah. But don't get distracted by that. So here's Elkanah. And listen to his family line. Listen to them. Now, do these names ring any bells? The son of Jehoram. The son of Elihu. The son of Tohu. The son of Zuph. Now, just think. Do any of those names ring any bells? They don't, do they? Because that's the point. These are not big names in the Bible. These are not people you go, oh, I know who you're from. I know who this guy is. They're nobodies. This is a guy who has come from a family of hillbilly nobodies. What's remarkable about him is his unremarkability. And I guess the most unremarkable, look at Zuph. Where is he from? He's an Ephraimite. His great-great-grandfather, Zuph, is an Ephraimite. Now, they are connected to Ephrathah, let me get that right, which is also known as Bethlehem. And let's face it, who significant has ever come from Bethlehem? See, at this point in the Bible storyline, no one has. No one has. There's no David yet. There's no baby going to be born in a manger. At this point, no one's heard of the place. See, God is teaching us here something about the way he works. See, something about the way he's going to bless and save and bring stability to the world. It's going to be through the sort of people you would never expect. That's the theme we're going to come up to again and again and again. As we read 1 Samuel, it's a theme that you see is big in Scripture. So there's national chaos. And 1 Samuel focuses in on this unremarkable family who have an all too common problem. You see it flicked up on the screen there. You see we meet Hannah's heartache. Have a look at verse 2. Look at the pain of the situation. You see Elkanah had 2 wives. One was called Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Now, the 2 wives, this wasn't illegal at this point. It wasn't also encouraged. Hannah must have been Elkanah's first wife, but she was not able to conceive. And because of the cultural situation, he takes on a second wife because descendants are so important. And you've got these 2 women. Hannah means grace. It should mean that she is blessed. And yet she isn't, in this instance, experiencing God's grace and blessing. And then you've got Peninnah, whose name means fruitful. And she has been. She's produced lots of children. And this has produced tension at home. And this tension came to a culmination point, a high point of pain once a year, verse 3, as the family go on their annual road trip to worship and sacrifice in Shiloh. It would have been the religious center at that point in the history. And there's 3 things that make this an agonizing experience for Hannah. And the first thing is that it's the meat at the meal. It's the meat at the meal. Before the sacrifice, they always met to have a meal. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? There's probably one point in the year for us where actually a meal is the point of most pain. The Christmas meal. You know, it's a time of real joy, isn't it? Because you are there with the people who you love. But it's also a time of real pain for others of us. Because there are people there you would long to be there and they aren't. Once a year. For us, we experience that. And it's the same for Hannah. This was that sort of meal. It was a point of great pain. And as Elkanah carved up the meat and handed it out, was the point where her situation was rammed home to her. Have a look at verse 4. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her and the Lord had closed her womb. Now, there's a couple of things verse 5 could mean. Here is Elkanah, and if you imagine he is served the meat to Peninnah, and he gives her enough meat for her and all her children. So there's a whole lot of meat there. How much meat should Hannah have? Just one bit of meat, but he loves her. And so he says, I'll give you a second portion of steak. Now, what does she want? She doesn't want more meat. She wants a child. Now, it's loving. It's a loving thing to do. But it just rams home, I don't want another steak. Don't you get it? It's interesting, actually. Verse 4 is difficult to translate. And it could mean this alternative. The RSV puts it like this. Although he loved Hannah, he would give Hannah only one portion because the Lord had closed her womb. So it could be that actually he just, there's all this meat that's gone to Peninnah and there's just one portion of meat that goes to Hannah. Either way, as she looks at the mountain of meat and the one portion, or the mountain of meat and the double portion, it just rams home to her that she's in this situation because she doesn't have the child she longs for. There's the meat. But there's also the mockery. See what Peninnah does. It's awful. It's so true to human experience, but it's just awful to look on and see. Look at what she does. Verse 6. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. Can you imagine what she would have said? This torment. Hannah, your name means grace. It means blessed, but look, just one portion of meat again. He loves you, doesn't he? He loves you, and that's why he's given you a second portion of meat, but all he wants is kids, and look at this. Year after year, jab after jab, dig after dig. Can you imagine the mental torment? She'd have hated it. She'd have hated herself. And then it's not just the meat or the mockery, it's the well-meaning statement that just makes it worse. Have a look at verse 8. Here's Elkanah. And I think it's just, in some ways, I think here he's being a classic bloke with the emotional intelligence of a cockroach. So look at what he says. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you so downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? He says, come on, love. Here's the box of Kleenex. Clear yourself up. There's a great roast on. Come on, eat up. Eat up. That will make you feel better. And come on, just think about reality. Who needs children when you're married to me? The meat, the mockery, the well-meaning words of a loving husband who just makes it worse. See, Hannah's heartache, it's misery, isn't it? And so one year she is driven to do something that she hadn't quite done before. Have a look at verses 9 to 18. We see Hannah's request. What does she do one year? She goes and makes a bold and raw petition to God. Verse 9. Once when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. Now, why is she praying to the Lord? What have we been told twice? Have a look at verse 5. End of verse 5. Why can't she have children? Well, there would have been biological complications, but we're told there it is the Lord who closed her womb. Have a look at verse 6. Because the Lord had closed her womb. And here she is. And she is turning to the Lord. Now, she could be fatalistic about it. She could be saying, well, if God's done this, then who am I? There's nothing. I'm just going to passively accept my lot. She could be resentful about it. If God has done this to me, I want nothing to do with him. But Hannah knows God is not just sovereign. He's not just in charge, but he's also good. And so she doesn't passively accept her situation. She throws herself upon him in deep anguish, weeping bitterly. Verse 11, in misery. In verse 16, she describes it as great anguish and grief. This would not have been a perfectly composed prayer. As she's praying in her heart and her mouth is moving, when she is at the end of her tether, it probably would have looked very undignified, but she did the best thing you could ever do when you're at the end of your tether. In the words of 15, she pours out her soul to the Lord. Why? Because he's not just in charge, he is good. What does she say in verse 11? Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery, remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son. Now let's listen to this. Then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. That was a Nazirite vow, the razor not being used on his head. And it was something that you would take, and it would only be for a limited period of time. And yet here she is saying that if you give me a son, I will give him back to you to serve you forever. Sort of a desperate prayer, isn't it? Lord, give me what my heart most desires, and then actually I'm going to give him back to you. Well, Eli, who misunderstands the situation, gets corrected. And verse 17, he says, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. And how does the story move on? Well, 19 and 20. Hannah, verse 18, she went away. She ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Now, does she know the answer to her prayer at this point? Does she know what the Lord will do? No. She doesn't. She doesn't know. But there's been a fundamental change in her because she has cast her burdens on the Lord because he cares for her. Or God is in control and God is good. And however he answers, whether it's yes or no or wait, I can trust him. And amazingly, 19 and 20, he gives Hannah this miracle child, Samuel. And what does Samuel mean? Have a look at the little b there and have a look at the bottom of your page. Samuel sounds like the Hebrew for heard by God. His very name speaks of God's faithfulness. Because I asked the Lord for him. And so Hannah has this baby, and the question in 21 to 28 is, what will she do with this baby? And she obeys. You know, how hard must this have been? She weans the boy. He comes into the world, and at a tender age, she takes him up to Shiloh, verse 27 and 28. And she says, I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord. And she worshipped the Lord there. So we have this miracle child left in Shiloh to be trained and taught and given to the Lord. Now we're going to come back to Samuel in the weeks and weeks to come. But the question is, what is God teaching us here? You know, what is he teaching us here? What does it mean for us? Written 3,000 years ago, an obscure family in the Middle East. How does that affect us? Well, look, just a couple of points as we come to start tackling 1 Samuel. When we read Old Testament narrative, our temptation can be to say, I am Moses. What Moses does is what I should do. Or I'm David. What David does, I should do. Or I'm Hannah. What Hannah does, I should do. But what we've got to understand is those characters are not the hero of the story. You see, God's the hero of the story. We're not the hero. God is the hero. He's always the hero of the story. And here, he is about bringing about a leader that will not just bring salvation and stability for his people, but a leader who will bring that for the world. And Hannah is at the center of this. And the danger is, like I said, we could say, well, it's all about Hannah and her faith. But actually, it's more about what God is doing in raising up a leader for the world. See, it can be this passage, great damage can be done in the lives of believers from this passage. Because we can think God is making promises to us that he doesn't make. That God will give us our heart's desire in the midst of trials if we just respond in the right way. You know, the person struggling with whatever the trial is, even fertility. And people may say, well, you need to look at this passage and you need to ask God in the way Hannah does, and maybe he will give you a child. But that is not the promise here. He's not saying that if you cry enough, or if you're heartbroken enough, or if you say the words in quite the right way, or if you promise to say, I'm going to give this child to Sunday school from the age of 4 and then they'll become a minister, then he will answer your prayers. That is not the promise of what God is doing through this passage. You know, the reason she is highlighted is because this is not normal. What happens to Hannah is not normal. And look, there are 3 clues in the text that show us God is doing something much bigger than we think. Look at Hannah's name and situation. I highlighted it at the start. What do we know about Hannah's name and situation? Well, her name means grace. It means blessed. And actually in her experience, it's barrenness. You know, her life is a microcosm of the nation of Israel, of God's people. You see, they were meant to be blessed. God had rescued them and laid his name on them, and yet their experience was not blessing. As we look at her, we see actually the situation going on in Israel. There's a barrenness in Israel. But it's not just that. Look at the way she talks to God and the way he responds. Have a look at verse 11. What does she say? Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me. See those two words? Remember me. And verse 19, have a look at that. Elkanah made love to his wife, Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. Now, it's not that God is forgetful. It's not like God has got so many things going on in his head that he's got the universe to kind of keep, the worlds have got to keep spinning, and literally all of them. 100 billion stars, they've all got to keep spinning, and he's got to make sure everyone takes the next breath, and he's got to make sure the birds have food to eat, and there's just so many things on his to-do list that he just gets to this point, and he goes, I've kind of forgotten about my promises to Israel. I've forgotten about my people, my precious people. I'm sorry, you're just at the bottom of my to-do list. I couldn't get to it today. That is not what it is saying. See, all of that is perfectly, permanently at the front of God's mind. And when this term, God remembers, comes up, it is code word that God is about to act in a dramatic way to save his people. You know, if you know anything about the Bible storyline, there's a number of times where it comes up, Noah's on the ark. And God remembers and brings him to safety. Abraham is pleading for Lot, he wants to be spared from Sodom's fate, and God remembers Abraham. At the start of Exodus, God's people are groaning in slavery, being ill-treated. They cry out, and God remembers and raises up Moses. See, when he remembers here, it is code word for saying, I am going to bring someone who's going to do something dramatic to save my people. And so he gives his people a miracle baby from an unknown family, from an unknown town of Bethlehem. Does that sound familiar? And just look at Elkanah's mistake. It's the third thing in the text. Elkanah's mistake. Have a look in 22 to 23. In fact, let me just have a look at 22. This is what Hannah says. Hannah did not go. This is when they go up after the baby's been born. She said to her husband, after the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always. Do what seems best to you, her husband Elkanah told her. Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good your word. Because she said, after he's weaned, I'm going to take him to the Lord. But what does he say in verse 23? May the Lord make good whose word? His word. Now, at what point has God made a promise in 1 Samuel chapter 1? I don't think he has. He hasn't. He hasn't. Whose word? It's his word. Which promises is he referring to? I think his promises he's referring to here is God's promises to Abraham, that he would make them a great nation, and from them he would raise up a leader who would bless all the nations. See, Elkanah, as he sees this miracle child, he goes, God is doing something far bigger here. See, the promise for us is this. It is not that for those of us who are struggling with infertility, that God will certainly give you a child in this life. But the promise is this. God will bring about a king, a leader, who will take us to a world, who will rescue us to a world where we will never have heartache like that again. All those hopes and longings that Hannah so desires and so many of us so desire, one day they will be satisfied in the new heavens, the new earth, when the miracle King Jesus will reign. And what is he doing here in 1 Samuel? He's saying, I don't want you to miss this. I don't want you to miss this. Here, sat in Norwich in 2019. Don't miss the miracle child. Now, I promise this is the last time I'm going to talk about the Rugby World Cup. And I don't want to know the result of the Wales-Australia game, because I'll watch it later. I don't know the results, so don't come and tell me. On a phone switched off, I'm not going to know. But the interesting thing about the Rugby World Cup, I might use the Rugby World Cup again if Wales win the Rugby World Cup, okay? But I won't use it again. But one of the things that is interesting about Japan was about 2 or 3 years ago, 80% of Japan didn't know that the Rugby World Cup was coming. They didn't even know about it. They don't know the rules. They're more interested in sumo wrestling. They're not so interested in rugby. But a massive effort has been made for people to hear and know about it, and particularly by the Welsh Rugby Union. So they've sent out people and teams to the town where Wales have their base camp, and they've been in the schools, and they've been teaching people about rugby and the rules to rugby, and this is what to expect, so that when the day finally came, when the Welsh team arrived in Kitsatsu, they were ready. They knew what to look for. In fact, when the Welsh team went to train in the in the stadium in this city, 15,000 people turned up. Japanese people who had learnt the Welsh national anthem and sung it brilliantly. They were prepared. They were ready for the moment because of all that build-up, so they wouldn't miss this glorious moment. Now, obviously, it's pathetic compared to what we're dealing with here. But here we are, 1,500 years before Christ. And God is saying, I'm lacing into history events and patterns and situations so that when the King comes, you will know. You will know how I work. I work through miracle children. You will know where I will work. You might find Bethlehem has a little bit to do with it. So that when the King comes, you go, it's him. He's the one. He's the one who's going to bring the peace and security and salvation that I long for. See, as we look into the face of this little boy Samuel, he points us forward to another miracle boy who will sort it all out. Now that is the big hit. But just finally, it is worth saying, here is Hannah and here is her faith. And what does she know about the Lord? Just have a look at chapter 2, verse 9. It says, this prayer, we're going to spend some time on it next week. It is the heart of 1 Samuel. What she says in the prayer is the main point of the book of 1 Samuel. And look at what she says. Verse 9, just before 8b. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants. And if you just flip back to chapter 1, what does she describe herself in her prayer? Verse 11. Look at this. Lord Almighty, if you'll only look on your servant's misery. Remember me and not forget your servant. See, she knows that however God deals with the trials that we face in this life, and I'm aware I've touched on really sensitive, it's a really sensitive area that Hannah is struggling with. She can say one thing for certain. Verse 9, he will guard the feet of his faithful servants. He may not give us our heart's desires now, but he promises every longing will be satisfied in eternity. And in the midst of the trial now, he will guard your feet. In the words of 1 Peter, he says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you.